The first snowflake that fell on her father's grave seemed wrong for Arizona, but the November wind carried it down from the high country all the same, and Willow Carson didn't bother brushing it from her dark hair as she knelt in the dust beside the fresh-turned earth. She had been crying for 3 hours when the shadow fell across her, broad and silent as a mountain itself. Willow didn't look up at first. She had no words left for well-meaning townspeople or her father's business associates who had already paid their respects and moved on with their lives. Her throat was raw from sobbing, her eyes swollen nearly shut, and the world had narrowed to this small plot of land outside Winslow where they had buried Samuel Carson that morning. The shadow didn't move. It didn't speak. It simply stood there, patient as stone. Finally, after another 20 minutes had passed and the sun had shifted enough that she felt the loss of warmth, Willow raised her head. The man standing 3 feet behind her was the largest human being she had ever seen. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders that seemed to span half the sky. His hair, dark brown with hints of sun-bleached gold, fell past his collar in waves that suggested he cut it himself when he remembered to. His face was weathered from years under the open sky, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days of beard growth. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. They were a startling gray-blue, like storm clouds over the desert, and they held a depth of understanding that made her chest tighten. He wore buckskin and wool, the practical clothing of a man who lived in the high country. A rifle was slung across his back, and a hunting knife hung at his belt. His hands, she noticed, were scarred and capable, the hands of someone who had built his own life with them. "I don't need company," Willow said, her voice hoarse and broken. The man said nothing. He didn't nod or shake his head. He simply remained where he was, his presence solid and somehow comforting despite her words. Willow turned back to the grave. Her father had been everything to her. When her mother died of fever 6 years ago, Samuel Carson had raised his daughter alone, teaching her to read and write, to keep accounts for his freight business, to think for herself in a world that often preferred women to be quiet and ornamental. He had been only 48 when the heart attack took him, standing in the warehouse he had built from nothing, clutching his chest and calling her name. She had run to him, had held his hand as he died, had watched the light leave his eyes while the workers stood helpless and afraid around them. "I should have made him rest more," Willow whispered to the grave. "He was always working, always pushing himself. I should have insisted he see a doctor. I should have noticed something was wrong." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and snow from the high country. Willow wrapped her arms around herself, shivering in her black mourning dress. She hadn't thought to bring a shawl, hadn't thought about anything except getting through the funeral, getting away from the pitying looks and the hollow condolences. A weight settled across her shoulders. The man had removed his heavy wool coat and draped it over her without a word. It was warm from his body heat and smelled of wood smoke and mountain air. Willow started to protest, to tell him she didn't need his help, but the warmth was too welcome. She pulled the coat tighter around herself. "Thank you," she said quietly. The man still didn't speak. He moved a few feet away and lowered himself to sit on a flat rock, his posture patient and relaxed. He wasn't watching her directly, but she could tell he was aware of her every movement. Willow didn't know what to make of him. She had lived in Winslow all her 22 years and knew most of the faces in town. This man was a stranger. The way he carried himself, the wildness that seemed to cling to him like the scent of pine, suggested he was one of the mountain men who came down from the high country occasionally for supplies. They were a rare breed in 1884, most of them having moved on as civilization crept westward, but a few still remained in the remote places where the land was too rough for farming or ranching. Time passed. The sun continued its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Willow's tears came and went in waves. Sometimes she talked to her father's grave, telling him things she wished she had said while he lived. Other times she sat in silence, trying to comprehend a future without him in it. Through it all, the mountain man remained. He didn't try to comfort her with platitudes or urge her to leave. He simply existed in her space, a steady presence that asked nothing of her. As the light began to fade, Willow finally pushed herself to her feet. Her legs were stiff from kneeling so long, and she swayed slightly. The man was beside her in an instant, his hand under her elbow, steadying her with surprising gentleness for someone so large and rough-looking. "I'm all right," Willow said, but she didn't pull away from his support. "I should go home. It's getting dark." The man nodded. He helped her find her balance, then stepped back to give her space. Willow started to remove his coat, but he shook his head. "Keep it," he said. His voice was deep and rough from disuse, but there was kindness in it. "Cold tonight." "But you'll freeze," Willow protested. A hint of a smile touched his weathered face. "I've slept in snow drifts. November evening won't hurt me." Willow studied him for a long moment. "Who are you?" "Lucas Hammond," he said. "From up in the high country. I'm Willow Carson." "I know." He gestured toward the grave. "Your father was a good man. Honest. When I came down for supplies last spring, he gave me fair prices, treated me like a human being instead of a curiosity." Willow's eyes filled with tears again. "He was the best man I ever knew," Lucas nodded. "Could see that in how he talked about you, proud as could be of his daughter." The tears spilled over, and Willow pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to contain the sobs that wanted to break free. Lucas stood there, solid and patient, until she regained control of herself. "I don't know what I'm going to do," Willow admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "The business, the warehouse, all of it. I don't know if I can manage it alone." "You won't figure it all out tonight," Lucas said quietly. "One step at a time, that's how you climb a mountain." Something about the simple wisdom in his words steadied her. Willow took a deep breath and nodded. "Will you walk me home? It's not far, just at the edge of town." Lucas picked up his rifle and gestured for her to lead the way. They walked in silence through the gathering dusk, past the scattered buildings that made up Winslow. The town was small, barely more than a main street with a few cross streets, built along the railroad line that had brought prosperity to the region. Her father's warehouse stood at the northern edge, a solid structure that had been his pride and joy. Willow's home was a modest house behind the warehouse, with a small garden that she tended and a porch where her father used to sit in the evenings. As they approached, she felt the emptiness of it settle over her like a weight. Going inside to that silence, to rooms that still held her father's presence but would never hold him again, seemed impossible. She stopped at the gate, her hand on the latch, unable to make herself move forward. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't go in there yet." Lucas didn't tell her she had to. He simply stood beside her, waiting. Willow turned away from the house and walked to the porch, sitting down on the steps. Lucas sat beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. They sat in silence as the stars began to emerge overhead, brilliant and cold in the desert sky. "My mother died when I was 16, Willow said after a while. "I thought that was the worst pain I would ever feel, but this is different. My mother's death was slow. We had time to say goodbye to prepare ourselves, but my father was here one moment and gone the next. I keep thinking he's going to walk through that door, that this is all some terrible dream." "It's not a dream," Lucas said gently, "but the pain won't always be this sharp. Time doesn't heal it exactly, but it makes it something you can carry." Willow looked at him. "You've lost people." It wasn't a question, but Lucas nodded. "My whole family, Fire took our homestead when I was 19. Parents, 2 younger sisters, all gone in one night. I was out checking traps, came home to ashes. I'm so sorry, Willow breathed. It was 12 years ago, Lucas said. The pain changed over time, became part of me instead of something trying to tear me apart. That's when I went to the mountains. Needed the quiet, the space. Found a peace up there I couldn't find anywhere else. Is that why you came down today? For supplies? Lucas shook his head. Came down because something told me I needed to be here. Can't explain it better than that. Was heading to the general store when I saw the funeral procession. Saw you standing at the grave after everyone else left. Seemed wrong to leave you alone like that. Willow felt fresh tears slide down her cheeks. You stood there for hours. You didn't even know me. Didn't need to know you to see you were hurting. Didn't need to know you to do the right thing. They sat in silence for a while longer. The night air grew colder, and Willow was grateful for Lucas's coat. She should invite him inside, offer him supper or at least coffee, but she still couldn't make herself cross that threshold. I have to go in eventually, she said softly. I know that. I just don't know how to start living in a world without him. You start with tomorrow, Lucas said. Just tomorrow. Don't think about next week or next month. Just wake up tomorrow and do the next thing that needs doing. Then the next thing after that. That's all anyone can do. Willow turned to look at him, really look at him. In the starlight, his features were softer, the hardness that came from years of solitude gentled by the kindness in his eyes. He was probably in his early 30s, she guessed, though the wilderness had weathered him in ways that made age hard to determine. The muscles in his arms and shoulders were evident even through his shirt, the build of a man who chopped his own wood and hunted his own food. His hands were large and scarred, but she remembered how gentle they had been when he steadied her at the grave. Why are you being so kind to me? Willow asked. You could have walked past. You could have offered condolences and moved on like everyone else. Lucas was quiet for a long moment. Because I remember what it was like to be alone with that kind of pain. I remember wishing someone had just stayed with me, not trying to fix anything or make it better, just being there so the silence wasn't so complete. Figured I could be that for you. Something in Willow's chest loosened slightly. Thank you, she said, her voice breaking. Thank you for staying. Lucas nodded. They sat together on the porch steps as the night deepened around them, 2 people bound by loss and loneliness, finding an unexpected comfort in each other's presence. Eventually, Willow found the strength to stand. I should go inside. You should find somewhere warm to sleep. I'll camp outside town, Lucas said, rising to his feet with easy grace despite his size. Got my bedroll with my horse at the livery. You could stay in the warehouse, Willow offered. There's a small office with a stove. It would be warmer than camping. Lucas hesitated, clearly not wanting to impose, but Willow was already moving toward the warehouse, key in hand. She opened the door and led him inside, lighting a lamp to push back the darkness. The main space was filled with crates and barrels, supplies her father had been preparing to ship. The sight of his handwriting on the inventory lists made her throat tighten, but she forced herself to keep moving. The office was at the back, a small room with a desk, a filing cabinet, and a pot-bellied stove. Willow lit the stove and showed Lucas where he could find firewood and water. There's coffee and some bread in the cupboard, she said. Help yourself to whatever you need. This is generous of you, Lucas said. It's the least I can do after you spent the whole day standing in the cold for a stranger. Lucas's expression was serious. You're not a stranger anymore, Willow Carson. The way he said her name with such quiet certainty made her heart skip. Willow felt heat rise to her cheeks and turned away quickly. Good night, Mr. Hammond. Lucas, he corrected gently. Just Lucas. Good night, Lucas. Willow fled before she could embarrass herself further. She hurried across the yard to her house, finally forcing herself through the door. The emptiness hit her like a physical blow, and she had to lean against the door frame to keep from collapsing. But she didn't collapse. She took off Lucas's coat and hung it carefully on a hook. She moved through the house, lighting lamps, stoking the fire in the kitchen stove. She made herself tea and forced down a few bites of bread. She washed her face and changed out of her funeral dress. She did the next thing, and the next thing, and somehow she made it through the first night alone. The next morning, Willow woke to find Lucas chopping wood in her backyard. She stood at the kitchen window, watching the rhythmic swing of the axe, the way his muscles flexed with each stroke. He had removed his shirt despite the cold, and she could see the full extent of his powerful build, his back and arms corded with strength earned through hard labor. She should probably stop staring, but Willow found she couldn't look away. There was something mesmerizing about the efficient way he worked, the way he seemed completely at home in the physical world in a way she had never been. When he finished, Lucas split the wood into neat stacks and carried several armloads to her porch. Only then did he pull his shirt back on and notice her watching from the window. He raised a hand in greeting, and Willow felt herself blush as she waved back. She opened the door as he approached. "You didn't have to do that. Noticed you were low," Lucas said simply. "Figured you had enough to worry about without wondering if you'd stay warm." Willow realized she hadn't even thought about the firewood. "Thank you. Would you like breakfast? It's the least I can offer." Lucas looked like he might refuse, but his stomach betrayed him with a low growl. He grinned sheepishly. Breakfast would be good. Willow stepped back to let him in. Having another person in the house helped somehow, made the emptiness less absolute. She cooked eggs and bacon, made strong coffee, and set out the last of the bread. Lucas ate with the appreciation of someone who usually cooked for himself over a campfire, complimenting her cooking in a way that seemed genuine. "What are your plans?" Lucas asked as they cleared the dishes. "For the business, I mean," Willow sighed. "I don't know. I helped my father with the accounts and correspondence, but I don't know if I can run it alone, and I'm not sure anyone would want to do business with a woman." "Your father seemed to think you were capable," Lucas observed. "My father loved me. He might have been biased." Lucas shook his head. "Met a lot of proud fathers who wouldn't trust their daughters with real responsibility no matter how much they loved them. Your father put you in charge of his accounts. That means something." Willow wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at her. "Even if I'm capable, that doesn't mean the other freight companies and suppliers will work with me. This is a man's world." "Then you'll have to be tougher than any man," Lucas said matter-of-factly. "Show them you can't be pushed around or cheated." "Easy for you to say," Willow said with a weak smile. "You're built like a bear. No one would dare try to cheat you." Lucas chuckled, the sound warm and genuine. "Size helps, but toughness comes from here." He tapped his chest over his heart. "And from here." He tapped his temple. "You've got both, or you wouldn't have made it this far." Willow felt something shift inside her, a tiny spark of determination that hadn't been there before. Maybe she couldn't do everything her father had done, but she could try. She owed him that much. "I should go through his papers," she said. "Figure out what commitments he made, what shipments are pending. The business can't just stop because he's gone." "Want help?" Lucas offered. "I can read and write well enough. Might be useful to have another set of eyes." Willow hesitated. She barely knew this man, and inviting him deeper into her father's business felt like a risk. But there was something solid and trustworthy about Lucas Hammond. Her father had liked him, had treated him with respect. That meant something. "I'd appreciate the help," she said finally. They spent the morning in the warehouse office, going through Samuel Carson's meticulous records. Willow was relieved to find that her father had kept everything in order. He had 3 major contracts pending: one to ship mining equipment to Flagstaff, one to deliver lumber to a ranch outside Holbrook, and one to transport household goods for a family moving to Prescott. "These are all doable," Lucas said, studying the contracts. "The mining equipment is already here in the warehouse. You just need to arrange transport." "That's the part I'm not sure about," Willow admitted. "My father had relationships with the freight drivers and railroad agents. I don't know if they'll work with me the same way." "Only one way to find out," Lucas said. "You go talk to them today. Show them you know what you're doing and that you expect to be treated fairly." "Will you come with me?" The words were out before Willow could stop them. She felt foolish immediately. "Never mind, that's too much to ask." "You've already done so much." "I'll come," Lucas said without hesitation, "but I'll stay in the background. This needs to be you taking charge, not you hiding behind a man. People need to see you're capable on your own." Willow felt a rush of gratitude and something else, something warm that had nothing to do with the stove. "Thank you, Lucas." They spent the afternoon making rounds to the various businesses and individuals her father had worked with. Willow was nervous at first, but Lucas's presence behind her was steadying. He didn't speak or interfere, just stood there like a mountain, solid and unmovable. Some of the men were skeptical. A few were openly dismissive. But Willow stood her ground, citing contracts and prices with the confidence that came from having actually done the accounting work. When one freight driver tried to raise his rates, claiming he had never agreed to what Samuel had written down, Willow calmly produced the signed contract and pointed out the date and terms. "My father was honest, and so am I," she said firmly. "We have an agreement. I expect you to honor it." The driver backed down, grumbling but accepting her terms. Lucas caught her eye and gave her the smallest nod of approval, and Willow felt 10 feet tall. By the end of the day, she had confirmed all 3 contracts and scheduled the first shipment for the following week. She had also made it clear to every man she dealt with that Carson Freight was still in business and would be run with the same integrity her father had established. As they walked back to the warehouse in the fading light, Willow felt exhausted but accomplished. "I can't believe we did all that in one day." "You did all that," Lucas corrected. "I just stood there looking intimidating." Willow laughed, the first genuine laugh she had managed since her father's death. "You're very good at looking intimidating." "Years of practice," Lucas said with a grin. They reached the warehouse, and Willow realized she didn't want Lucas to leave. The house would be empty and dark, and she would be alone with her grief again. But she couldn't ask him to stay indefinitely. He had his own life, his own cabin up in the mountains. "How long were you planning to stay in town?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual. Lucas shrugged. "Didn't have a set plan. Usually stock up on supplies and head back when I'm ready, but there's no rush." "You could stay a few more days," Willow said carefully, "if you wanted. The warehouse office is yours as long as you need it, and I could use the help getting these shipments organized." Lucas studied her face, and Willow had the unsettling feeling he could see right through her, could see the loneliness and fear she was trying to hide. But instead of calling her out on it, he simply nodded. "I'll stay a few more days," he said, "long as I'm not in the way." "You're not in the way," Willow said softly. "You're the only thing keeping me from falling apart." The words hung between them, more honest than she had intended. Lucas's expression softened, and he reached out to squeeze her shoulder gently, his large hand warm through her dress. "You're stronger than you think, Willow Carson," he said, "but everyone needs help sometimes. No shame in that." They had supper together that night, a simple meal of stew and cornbread that Willow threw together from what was in the pantry. Lucas told her stories about life in the high country, about tracking elk through snow and watching storms roll in from peaks so high they seemed to touch the sky. Willow found herself fascinated by his descriptions, by the wildness of a life so different from her own. "It sounds lonely," she said. "It is," Lucas admitted. "But it's also peaceful. No one telling you what to do or who to be, just you and the land figuring out how to live together. Don't you ever want more? A family, a home, people around you?" Lucas was quiet for a long moment. "Used to think I'd left all that behind when I lost my family, convinced myself I was better off alone. But lately—" He trailed off, his eyes meeting hers across the table. "Lately, I've been wondering if maybe I was wrong about that." Willow's breath caught. The intensity in his gaze made her heart race, and she had to look away before she said something foolish. She barely knew this man. It had only been 2 days since he appeared at her father's grave. This feeling, this pull toward him, couldn't be real. Could it? The days that followed fell into a pattern. Lucas helped Willow organize the warehouse and prepare shipments. He was good with the physical work, able to move heavy crates and barrels as if they weighed nothing. But he was also surprisingly good with the business side, catching errors in invoices and suggesting more efficient ways to organize the inventory. Willow found herself looking forward to their mornings together, planning the day's work over coffee. She enjoyed their suppers even more, the easy conversation that flowed between them as if they had known each other for years instead of days. Lucas was unlike any man she had ever known. He was strong and capable, able to handle any physical challenge, but he was also gentle and thoughtful. He listened when she talked, really listened, and he treated her opinions with respect. He never talked down to her or tried to take over. He was there to help, but he always made sure she remained in charge. On the 5th day, they were working in the warehouse when a group of men arrived. Willow recognized them as employees of Redding Transport, her father's biggest competitor. The leader was a man named Victor Redding, a slick-talking businessman who had been trying to buy out her father's contracts for years. "Miss Carson," Victor said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I heard about your father's passing. Terrible tragedy." "Thank you, Mr. Redding," Willow said carefully. She didn't trust this man, and his sudden appearance set her nerves on edge. "I wanted to come by and make you an offer," Victor continued. "Running a freight business is hard work, especially for a woman alone. I'd be willing to buy out your father's contracts and take the warehouse off your hands, give you a fair price, and save you the headache of trying to manage all this yourself." Willow felt her temper flare. "I'm not interested in selling, Mr. Redding. Carson Freight is staying in business." Victor's smile hardened. "Be reasonable, Miss Carson. You can't possibly run this operation alone. It's a man's business. You'll run it into the ground within a month, and then where will you be? Take my offer now while it's still on the table." "I said no," Willow repeated firmly. Victor took a step closer, his voice dropping to a more menacing tone. "I'm trying to help you here, girl. Don't be stupid about this. Your father's death leaves you vulnerable. There are a lot of people who might take advantage of that. I'm offering you a way out." Lucas stepped forward, his massive frame suddenly between Willow and Victor. He didn't say anything, didn't make any threatening gestures. He simply stood there, arms crossed over his broad chest, his gray-blue eyes cold as winter ice. Victor took an involuntary step back. "Who the hell are you?" "Lucas Hammond," Lucas said, his voice calm but edged with steel. "And the lady said no. Time for you to leave." Victor looked from Lucas to Willow and back again. "This isn't over. You can't hide behind your hired muscle forever." "I'm not hiding," Willow said, stepping out from behind Lucas. "I'm running a business. Carson Freight doesn't need your help, Mr. Redding. Now please leave my property." Victor's face flushed with anger, but he knew when he was outmatched. He jerked his head at his men, and they filed out of the warehouse. At the door, Victor turned back. "You're making a mistake," he said. "A big one. When they were gone, Willow let out a shaky breath. That was terrifying. "You did good," Lucas said. "Stood your ground. Only because you were here. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been." Lucas frowned. "You would have figured it out. You're not helpless, Willow." "I don't feel very strong right now," Willow admitted. Lucas turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "Strength isn't about never being afraid. It's about doing what needs to be done even when you are afraid. You've been doing that every day since your father died." Willow felt tears prick her eyes. "I don't want to do it alone." "You're not alone," Lucas said softly. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "I'm right here." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Willow didn't have a name for. She was acutely aware of how close Lucas was standing, of the warmth radiating from his large frame, of the way his eyes had softened as he looked at her. "Lucas," she whispered, not sure what she was asking for but knowing she needed something from him. He seemed to understand. His hand cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "Willow." And then he was kissing her, his lips warm and sure against hers. Willow melted into him, her hands coming up to grip his shirt as if he was the only solid thing in a spinning world. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but it deepened quickly as weeks of loneliness and need poured out of both of them. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Willow felt dazed. "I shouldn't have done that." "Why not?" Lucas asked, his voice rough. "Because my father just died." "Because I barely know you, because this is all happening too fast." Lucas nodded slowly. "All true, but doesn't change how I feel." "How do you feel?" Willow asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucas took a breath. "Like I've been waiting my whole life to find you. Like maybe all the years alone in the mountains were just preparation for this moment. Like I'd do anything to keep you safe and make you smile." Willow's breath caught. "Lucas, we've only known each other a week." "I know. Doesn't make it less true." Willow wanted to protest, to say this was impossible, but the words wouldn't come. Because the truth was, she felt it too. This pull toward Lucas, this sense that he was meant to be in her life. It was crazy and irrational, and everything her practical nature told her couldn't be real. But it felt real. "I don't know what to do with this," she admitted. "Don't have to do anything right now," Lucas said. "Just let it be. We'll figure it out together." That night, Willow lay awake in her bed, her mind racing. She touched her lips, remembering the kiss. Part of her felt guilty, as if she was betraying her father's memory by feeling something for someone so soon after his death. But another part of her knew her father would have wanted her to be happy, to find someone who treated her well. And Lucas treated her very well indeed. The next morning, Willow woke to find a problem. One of the freight drivers had backed out of the Flagstaff shipment, claiming he had a better offer from Victor Redding. Without a driver, she couldn't fulfill the contract, and that would damage her reputation before she had even truly established herself as the head of Carson Freight. "I can drive a wagon," Lucas said when she explained the problem over breakfast. Willow stared at him. "You do that? Why not?" "I know the route. I've hauled furs down from the high country plenty of times. Mining equipment can't be that different. Lucas, it's a 3-day trip there and back. You'd be gone almost a week." "So come with me," Lucas said. "Bring your ledgers and paperwork. You can work on the business while we travel. When we get back, you'll have one contract successfully completed and the confidence to handle the next one." Willow wanted to say yes immediately, but propriety held her back. "I can't travel alone with you for a week. People would talk." "People already talk," Lucas pointed out. "Half the town probably thinks we're involved already, what with me staying in your warehouse and eating supper at your house every night." He was right. Willow had seen the looks from townspeople, the whispers. She had been too consumed with grief and business to care much, but she knew her reputation was already questionable. "If we're going to do this, we should make it proper," Willow said slowly. "We should get married." Lucas's eyes widened. "What?" Willow felt her face flush hot. "I'm sorry, that came out wrong. I just meant if you're serious about what you said yesterday, about your feelings for me, then maybe we should consider making it official. It would solve the reputation problem and give me a partner in the business. But I understand if that's too much too fast." "Forget I said anything." Lucas held up a hand to stop her rambling. "Willow, are you asking me to marry you?" "I'm making a practical suggestion," Willow said defensively. "You said you were tired of being alone. I need help with the business. We clearly get along well. It makes sense." "It makes sense," Lucas repeated slowly. Then a grin spread across his weathered face. "Woman, that's the worst proposal I've ever heard." Willow felt mortification wash over her. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have presumed." Lucas crossed the kitchen in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. "I'm not saying no. I'm saying if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right." He knelt down on one knee, still holding her hand, looking up at her with those storm-gray eyes. "Willow Carson, I know we haven't known each other long. I know this is all happening faster than it probably should. But I also know that I've never felt this way about anyone in my life. You're strong and smart and beautiful, and being around you makes me want to be part of the world again instead of hiding from it. Will you marry me?" Willow felt tears streaming down her face, but for the first time since her father's death, they were tears of joy. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." Lucas stood and swept her into his arms, kissing her thoroughly. When he set her back on her feet, they were both grinning like fools. "We're crazy," Willow said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Probably," Lucas agreed. "But I'd rather be crazy with you than sane without you." They were married 2 days later by the circuit judge who happened to be passing through Winslow. It was a simple ceremony, with only a few witnesses from town. Willow wore a simple blue dress instead of white, still in half-mourning for her father. Lucas wore his cleanest buckskins and had trimmed his beard for the occasion. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas kissed her with a gentleness that made Willow's heart ache. She was married. To a man she had known less than 2 weeks. It should have terrified her, but instead she felt safe for the first time since her father died. They left for Flagstaff the next morning, the wagon loaded with mining equipment. Lucas drove while Willow sat beside him, working on account books and watching the Arizona landscape roll past. The November weather was cool but pleasant, the sky a brilliant blue overhead. Lucas told her stories as they traveled, filling the hours with tales of his life in the mountains. He talked about the cabin he had built with his own hands, about the wildlife he had observed, about the harsh winters and golden summers. Willow found herself fascinated by every detail, trying to picture the life he described. "Will you miss it?" she asked. "The solitude, the mountains." Lucas was quiet for a moment. "Parts of it, sure, but I won't miss the loneliness, and I figure there's no reason we can't visit. The cabin's still there. Maybe in the summer, when the business is slower, we could go up for a few weeks." "I'd like that," Willow said softly. The idea of seeing Lucas's world, the place that had shaped him, appealed to her greatly. They camped that night under the stars, Lucas setting up a comfortable camp with the ease of long practice. He built a fire and cooked supper, then spread out their bedrolls close together. Willow was nervous, knowing what was expected on a wedding night, but Lucas seemed to sense her anxiety. "We don't have to rush anything," he said quietly as they sat by the fire. "I'm not going anywhere." Willow felt relief flood through her, followed by a wave of affection for this man who was now her husband. She leaned against his shoulder and he wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "Tell me about your family," she said. "Your real family before the fire." Lucas was silent for a long moment, and Willow worried she had pushed too far. But then he began to speak, his voice low and filled with old grief. My father was a farmer, worked the land from sunrise to sunset. My mother was the kindest woman I ever knew. She could make anything grow, had a garden that was the envy of the county. My sisters were 8 and 10 when they died. Sarah was the serious one, always reading when she should have been doing chores. Emma was wild, always climbing trees and catching frogs. They sound wonderful, Willow said softly. They were. Losing them broke something in me. I couldn't stay on that land, couldn't bear to see the place where they died. So I ran to the mountains and stayed there for 12 years, telling myself I was better off alone. What changed? Willow asked. Lucas looked down at her, his expression tender. I saw a woman crying at her father's grave, and something in me knew I couldn't walk away. Knew I had to stay with her, had to help her through the grief. And somewhere in those first few days, I started to wake up again. Started to feel like maybe I could have a life again instead of just existing. Willow turned in his arms and kissed him, pouring all her gratitude and affection into the gesture. Lucas responded with the same gentleness he had shown her from the beginning, his large hands careful on her back. When they finally lay down to sleep, Willow curled against Lucas's side, her head on his broad chest. She could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong, and the sound lulled her into the deepest sleep she had managed since her father died. They reached Flagstaff 3 days later and delivered the mining equipment without incident. The mine foreman was surprised to see a woman handling the delivery, but accepted it without comment, especially with Lucas standing quietly behind her. Willow collected payment and made sure to get a signed receipt confirming Carson Freight had fulfilled the contract on time and in full. On the return journey, they took their time, stopping early each day to make camp and enjoy the landscape. Lucas taught Willow how to shoot his rifle, standing behind her and guiding her arms, his body warm and solid against her back. She was terrible at first, missing the target by yards, but gradually she improved. "You're a natural," Lucas said after she finally hit the mark. "I'm a disaster," Willow corrected, laughing. "But it's fun," Lucas grinned. "That's all that matters." That night by the campfire, Willow finally felt ready to take the next step in their marriage. She moved closer to Lucas, her intention clear, and he pulled her into his lap, kissing her deeply. They made love under the stars, Lucas's gentleness giving way to passion as Willow responded to his touch. It was awkward and sweet, and everything a first time should be, and when they finally lay tangled together afterward, Willow felt truly married for the first time. "I love you," she whispered against his chest. Lucas's arms tightened around her. "I love you too, Willow Hammond. More than I ever thought I could love anyone." They returned to Winslow as partners in every sense of the word. Lucas took on more of the physical work at the warehouse, while Willow handled the business side. And together, they made Carson Freight more successful than it had been even under her father's management. Lucas's presence and reputation for being tough, but fair helped smooth over any hesitation people had about working with a woman-owned business. Victor Redding tried to cause problems a few more times, but Lucas's quiet intimidation and Willow's sharp business sense kept him at bay. Eventually, he gave up and focused on his own operations, realizing he couldn't break the partnership between the Hammonds. As winter settled over Arizona, bringing cold nights and occasional snow, Willow found herself happier than she had thought possible just months before. The grief over her father's death was still there, but it had softened into something bearable, a sweet sadness rather than a crushing weight. She talked to Lucas about her father often, sharing memories and stories, and Lucas listened with the patience and understanding that had drawn her to him in the first place. In February, Willow realized she was pregnant. She told Lucas over breakfast, nervous about how he might react to the news. But his face lit up with pure joy, and he swept her into his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests. "We're having a baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "A real family." "Are you happy?" Willow asked, though his reaction made the answer obvious. "Happier than I've been since before the fire," Lucas said seriously. "You've given me everything, Willow. A home, a purpose, a family. I can't even put into words what that means to me." Willow felt tears slip down her cheeks. "You've given me the same things. I was so lost when my father died. I didn't know how I was going to survive, let alone build a life. But you showed up and stayed with me when I needed someone most. You've been my partner and my protector and my best friend." They held each other for a long time, grateful for the unexpected path that had brought them together. The pregnancy was easy at first, but as summer approached and Willow's belly swelled, the Arizona heat became oppressive. Lucas suggested they take a trip to his cabin in the high country, where the air would be cooler and cleaner. Willow agreed eagerly, curious to see the place that had been Lucas's home for so many years. They hired someone to manage the warehouse for a few weeks and made the journey north into the mountains. The cabin, when they finally reached it, was exactly as Willow had imagined. It was small but well built, set in a clearing surrounded by tall pines. A stream ran nearby, and the view from the porch looked out over valleys and peaks that seemed to stretch forever. "It's beautiful," Willow breathed. "It was lonely," Lucas said, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his hands resting on her rounded belly. "But now you're here, and it feels complete." They spent 3 weeks at the cabin, the most peaceful time Willow had ever experienced. Lucas hunted and fished, while Willow tended a small garden and explored the area near the cabin. In the evenings, they sat on the porch and watched the sun set over the mountains, talking about their future and the baby that would arrive in the fall. "What should we name him?" Willow asked one evening. "What makes you think it's a boy?" Lucas teased. "Just a feeling." "What about Samuel after my father?" Lucas smiled. "I'd be honored, and if it's a girl, I was thinking Emma after your sister." Lucas's expression softened, and Willow saw tears glisten in his eyes. "That would be perfect." The baby arrived in late October, a healthy boy with his father's gray-blue eyes and a loud cry that announced his presence to the world. Lucas was beside himself with joy, holding his son with a reverence that made Willow fall in love with him all over again. They named him Samuel Lucas Hammond, and he became the center of their world. Lucas proved to be a devoted father, getting up with the baby in the night and walking the floor with him when he was fussy. He built a cradle with his own hands, carving elaborate designs into the wood. He sang to Samuel in a surprisingly pleasant baritone, old songs from his childhood that Willow had never heard before. "You're a natural at this," Willow said one evening, watching Lucas rock their son to sleep. "I remember how my father was with my sisters," Lucas said quietly. "He was gentle with them, patient. I want to be that kind of father." "You already are," Willow assured him. As Samuel grew from an infant into a toddler, Carson Freight continued to expand. Lucas and Willow had built a reputation for honest dealing and reliable service, and contracts came in steadily. They hired additional workers to help with the heavy lifting, and Willow trained a young man to help with the bookkeeping. By the time Samuel was 3, they had enough saved to build a proper house, larger than the little place behind the warehouse. Lucas designed it himself, making sure there was plenty of room for a growing family. He built most of it with his own hands, though he accepted help from friends in town for the bigger jobs. The new house had a wide porch where they could sit in the evenings, a large kitchen where Willow could cook and bake, and bedrooms enough for the children they hoped to have. Lucas even built a separate office where Willow could work on the business without being interrupted. Their second child arrived 2 years after Samuel, a daughter they named Emma Rose. She had Willow's dark hair and Lucas's adventurous spirit, climbing everything she could reach from the moment she learned to walk. Lucas doted on her shamelessly, carrying her on his shoulders and teaching her the names of birds and trees. "You're going to spoil her," Willow said, watching Lucas let Emma help him chop wood by holding a small stick while he worked. "That's my job," Lucas said with a grin. "Mother teaches them to be smart and practical. Father spoils them rotten." Willow laughed, unable to argue when she was just as guilty of spoiling their children. A third child followed 2 years later, another boy they named William after Willow's grandfather. And 2 years after that, twin girls arrived, much to everyone's surprise. They named them Grace and Hope, and Lucas declared the house was now officially full. "5 children," he said, lying in bed one night with Willow curled against his side. "I never imagined I'd have this. Never thought I deserved it after losing my first family." "You deserve every bit of happiness," Willow said firmly. "You're a wonderful husband and father. Our children are lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one," Lucas said, kissing the top of her head. "I found you when I wasn't even looking, and you gave me a reason to live again." The years passed quickly, marked by the milestones of their children's lives. Samuel grew tall and strong like his father, eventually joining the family business and learning to manage the warehouse. Emma proved to have her mother's head for numbers and helped with the accounting. William wanted to be a doctor and went east to study medicine. The twins, inseparable as always, decided they wanted to be teachers. Lucas and Willow watched their children grow with pride and a touch of sadness at how quickly time moved. But they still had each other, and their love had only deepened over the years. On their 20th anniversary, Lucas took Willow back to the cabin in the high country. The children were old enough to manage on their own for a few weeks, and both Lucas and Willow needed the peace of the mountains. They spent their days exploring the wilderness Lucas knew so well, and their evenings sitting on the cabin porch watching the sunset. Willow was 42 now, with silver starting to thread through her dark hair. Lucas was 51, his beard more gray than brown, but his strength remained. "Do you ever regret it?" Willow asked one evening. "Giving up your solitary life to take on a wife and family and business?" Lucas pulled her close, his arm around her shoulders. "Not for a single second. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Willow Hammond. You and our children. You gave me a life worth living." "You saved me," Willow said softly. "When my father died, I didn't think I could survive it, but you stood beside me at his grave and stayed with me until I was ready to face the world again. You've been standing beside me ever since." "Always will," Lucas promised. "Long as I'm breathing." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge overhead. Willow thought about that day 20 years ago when she had been kneeling at her father's grave, drowning in grief. She thought about the mountain man who had appeared like an answer to a prayer she hadn't known how to voice. She thought about all the years since, the challenges and joys and ordinary moments that had woven together to create a life. "I love you," she said, the words as true now as they had been the first time she spoke them. "I love you too," Lucas said. "Today, tomorrow, always." They returned to Winslow renewed and refreshed, ready to face whatever the future held. The business continued to thrive, now being run mostly by Samuel with Emma's help. Lucas had stepped back from the heavy work, though he still came to the warehouse most days to consult and advise. Willow spent more time in charitable work, using the success of Carson Freight to help others in the community. She established a fund to help widows and orphans, remembering her own fear and uncertainty after her father's death. Lucas supported her efforts, helping build homes for families in need and teaching young men skills that would help them earn a living. Their children married and had children of their own, giving Lucas and Willow grandchildren to spoil and love. The house that had once seemed so large was often filled with the laughter and chaos of family gatherings. On a warm evening in May, 30 years after they first met, Lucas and Willow sat on their porch watching the sunset. Their grandchildren played in the yard, their shouts and laughter filling the air. Lucas reached over and took Willow's hand, his grip still strong despite the arthritis that had started to plague his joints. 30 years, he said softly. Doesn't seem possible. Best 30 years of my life, Willow said. Mine too. Lucas smiled at her, the same warm smile that had made her feel safe from the very beginning. You know what I remember most about the day we met? What's that? How small you looked, kneeling at that grave, how broken. And how determined I was to stay with you until you weren't alone anymore. He squeezed her hand. Didn't know then that I was the one who wasn't alone anymore, that you were going to save me just as much as I saved you. Willow felt tears prick her eyes, the happy kind that came from gratitude and love. We saved each other. We did, Lucas agreed, and we built something beautiful together. Look at all this. He gestured to the yard full of grandchildren, to the house they had built, to the life they had created. All of this came from one moment of choosing to stay instead of walking away. Best choice you ever made, Willow said with a smile. Second best, Lucas corrected. Best choice was asking you to marry me. I asked you, Willow reminded him. Debatable, Lucas said with a grin. But I'm not going to argue about who proposed. Point is, we ended up together, and that's all that matters. They sat together as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Their grandchildren eventually tired themselves out and came to the porch for hugs and kisses before their parents took them home. The house grew quiet, and Lucas and Willow moved inside to prepare for bed. As they had every night for 30 years, they fell asleep in each other's arms, grateful for the unexpected love that had found them both in their darkest moments and given them a lifetime of light. The years continued to pass, marked by more grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. Lucas's hair turned completely white, and his broad shoulders began to stoop with age. Willow's hands developed the same arthritis that plagued Lucas, making it harder to write and keep accounts. But they remained partners in all things, facing the challenges of aging together with the same determination that had gotten them through everything else. Samuel took over the business completely, running it with the same integrity his grandfather had established and his parents had maintained. Emma became a prominent businesswoman in her own right, expanding into new ventures. William returned from back east as a doctor and opened a practice in Winslow. The twins taught at the local school, shaping young minds with patience and creativity. Lucas and Willow were proud of all their children had accomplished, but they were most proud of the fact that their children were good people who treated others with kindness and respect. That, they agreed, was the true measure of successful parenting. On a cold November day, 45 years after they first met, Lucas woke with a pain in his chest. Willow wanted to fetch William immediately, but Lucas shook his head. "It's time," he said quietly. "I can feel it." "No," Willow said, her voice breaking. "Not yet, we have more time." Lucas pulled her into his arms, holding her as tightly as his weakened body would allow. "We've had 45 good years, Willow. That's more than most people get, more than I ever thought I deserved." "I need you," Willow whispered. "You don't need me anymore," Lucas said gently. "You're the strongest person I know. You'll be fine." "I don't want to be fine without you. I want us to be fine together." Lucas kissed her forehead. "I'll always be with you. Every sunset, every mountain peak, every moment of beauty in this world, that'll be me reminding you that I love you." William came, but there was little he could do. Lucas's heart was simply wearing out, ready to rest after a long life well lived. Their children and grandchildren gathered, saying their goodbyes, but Lucas saved his last moments for Willow. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice fading. "For everything. For saving me, for loving me, for giving me a family and a home and a reason to wake up every morning. Thank you for standing beside me when I needed someone most," Willow said, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for staying until I was ready." Lucas smiled, his eyes already distant. "I'll be waiting for you. Take your time, but not too long. I'll miss you." "I love you," Willow said. "Love you too, always." And then he was gone, slipping away as peacefully as he had lived the second half of his life. Willow held him for a long time, saying her goodbyes, remembering every moment of their decades together. The funeral was well attended, with people coming from all over the territory to pay their respects to Lucas Hammond. He was buried in the same cemetery where Samuel Carson rested, with a headstone that read, "Beloved husband, father, and friend." He stood beside those who needed him most. Willow visited the grave every day, talking to Lucas the way she had once talked to her father. She told him about the grandchildren and great-grandchildren, about the business, about the small moments of daily life. And sometimes, when the wind blew just right, she could almost feel him beside her, patient and steady as always. She lived another 5 years without him, years filled with family and purpose. She expanded the charitable work she had started, helping even more people in need. She wrote letters to her children and grandchildren, sharing stories of Lucas and her father and the wild times of the early West. She made sure everyone knew the story of how she and Lucas had met, how a mountain man had seen a woman crying over her father's grave and had stood beside her until she was ready to face the world again. On a warm spring morning, Willow didn't wake up. She passed peacefully in her sleep, a smile on her face. Her children found her with a letter on her bedside table, sealed and addressed to all of them. The letter read, "My dearest children, by the time you read this, I will be with your father again, and my heart is light at the thought. I have lived a long and blessed life, far richer than I ever imagined possible during those dark days after my father died. I want you to know that everything good in my life came from 2 moments of grace. The first was when your father appeared at your grandfather's grave and chose to stay with a grieving stranger. The second was when I chose to let him into my heart despite the fear and uncertainty. Love is a choice we make every day. Choose it. Choose kindness. Choose to stand beside those who need you, even when it's inconvenient. Choose to build something beautiful with the people you love. Your father and I built a life together from grief and loneliness, and it became something wonderful. You are all part of that wonder, and I am so proud of each of you. Take care of each other. Love each other. And know that your father and I will be watching over you, proud and grateful for the family we created together." With all my love, Mother Willow was buried beside Lucas, their headstones side by side, their hands almost touching across the small space between graves. The inscription on her stone read, "Beloved wife, mother, and friend, she found strength in love and gave it freely." Their children and grandchildren gathered at the grave, remembering and celebrating 2 people who had found each other in the darkest of times, and had built a legacy of love that would endure for generations. And in the high country, in a small cabin surrounded by pines, the wind whispered through the trees like a song of remembrance, carrying the story of a mountain man and the woman he had stood beside until she was ready, and then for the rest of their lives. The town of Winslow grew and changed over the years, but Carson Freight remained, run by the descendants of Lucas and Willow Hammond. The story of how the business began, how it was saved by a grieving daughter and a lonely mountain man who found each other when they needed it most, became part of the town's history. People told the story to their children, who told it to their children, a reminder that sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with grand gestures but with simple acts of kindness, with choosing to stay when you could walk away, with standing beside someone until they're ready to stand on their own. And in the cemetery outside Winslow, two graves rested side by side under the Arizona sun, a testament to a love that had begun with tears and silence and had grown into something that changed not just two lives, but generations that followed. The legacy of Lucas and Willow Hammond lived on in the children they raised, in the business they built, in the charitable work they started, and in the simple truth they proved through their lives together. That love can heal even the deepest wounds, that family can be found in unexpected places, and that sometimes the greatest gift we can give another person is simply to stay beside them until they're ready to face whatever comes next. Their story became a legend in Winslow, told and retold, changing slightly with each telling but always maintaining the core truth, that a mountain man saw a woman crying over her father's grave alone, and he stood beside her until she was ready. And in that moment of compassion and patience, two broken souls found healing, love, and a future neither of them had dreamed possible. The end.